Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is essentially a free-to-play gacha open-world RPG with lots of waifus and husbandos. And this game really blew up when it came out and attracted players from like every single genre. But is it worth playing in 2021? Let's jump into it. So this video is essentially just going to be a flat out review. I'm just going to go through all the pros and all the cons and like why you should or shouldn't play the game in 2021. Well, let's just start off with all the pros then. Number one, there's ongoing regular updates. They have a really beautiful, expansive world, and honestly, not every region has even come out yet. Like every region is so distinct and unique. Everything I feel like is very different. When I travel from one region to another, it's honestly really beautiful. And all these regions are based off real world areas and countries, and I think that's really cool. Honestly, some of the views that I can see in the game are quite mesmerizing. And I think that having these ongoing regular updates is really exciting to see something fresh and new, and I feel like I have so much to explore and to look forward to. My second point would be that MiHoYo, or the developers of this game, actually really listen to their fan base. They add quality of life changes, buffs, nerfs, and they actively watch and interact with the community. They'll always ask for ways to improve, and they always take a look at their forums. And for example, I know some people, they were playing on lower end laptops or lower end devices, and they weren't actually able to get the game running. But MiHoYo at some point actually decided to find a way to lower the graphics and optimize their game more so that they can get the game running on lower end PCs or lower end devices. And it actually runs quite well. Over Christmas break, I was actually basically I went home and I didn't have my higher end devices there, so I had to play on a laptop without a graphics card, and guess what, it was actually able to run. There's also a lot of character bugs, and every time the developers fix it quite quickly, and when they do, they offer everyone in the game free in-game currency, which is how they make money, because this game is a free-to-play game and they essentially rely on a gacha system in order to make their profits. So for them to be able to own up to their mistakes and kind of just give free money to people, I feel like that's very respectable. Not many developers do this, right? But yeah, I think that's something that a lot of developers should take note of. Another pro I feel like is that it's actually usable in multiple platforms. What I mean by this is that, one, it's cross-savable, which means that if you were to play on your PC and then you stop playing, you can immediately jump onto your phone and play where you left off from. I feel like this was like a main selling point of the Switch, where you can like put it on your TV and then from there you can like take it and it becomes like a mobile game. But the fact that you're able to do this with Genshin Impact, I think, is really cool too. The one exception would be for the PS4, but that's mainly because of Sony things. Second thing would be that it's actually cross-compatible, which just means that it's like you're able to play with your friends on the PS4 even if you have like a PC, which is really cool too. But not only that, there's still planning on releasing Genshin Impact on the PS5 and the Switch, so there's more coming. So my fourth pro would be that if you're like really into world building and you're really into side quests, I feel like this game has a lot of great side stories and fleshed out characters, and I feel like the main storyline is pretty good too. I wouldn't say the main storyline is the best thing out there, but the main storyline is definitely pretty unique, and overall the world is very fleshed out, and every character has their own unique personality and stories, which leads me to my fifth point. There's lots of lots of husband. There's a lot of characters. And everyone has a relatively unique playstyle. I wouldn't go to say that they're the most unique. I think there are pretty similar characters, but you can definitely have a lot of fun mixing and matching characters. And at this point, I still think it's easily catch-upable because of the way that the leveling up system works. The more you level up, the harder it is to keep leveling up. I had a friend who started like 2 months after me, and they were actually able to catch up to me, and they're like the same world level as me now. And I think it's still in the beginning phases anyways in 2021. We're still getting a lot of freebies just because of promotion. And there's a really good music score if you're into that. And I remember when I was playing during Christmas break, the Winter Region came out, and I felt like really immersed into the game, and it gave me this kind of warm feeling. And I don't know where they get the budget for this, but there's a lot of good voice actors, especially the Japanese ones. If you're into anime at all, you're in for a surprise. There's a lot of good voice actors that voice an anime in this game. And a lot of people call this game a Breath of the Wild copy, but I feel like it's way too good to be called a Breath of the Wild copy. It takes, for sure, a lot of inspiration from it, like the treasure chests and the map layout and stuff like that, but even its cooking system, even if it's similar to Breath of the Wild, it's definitely different. It has its own combat system, which is really fun to play with, but it does, I feel like, take a lot of the best mechanics from a bunch of games. Like, they have a daily system, which is very common in a lot of Chinese games, and in games like Animal Crossing, right? And it has like a bounty system, which is kind of like tracking a mini Monster Hunter mini game. And it has Sealies, which I feel like is the Follow the Birdies from Ghost of Tsushima. Best of all, it is completely free to play. I feel like you can get as far as you want without having to spend a dime. And for an open world RPG that's expanding with such amazing fleshed out characters, I think that's really amazing. Alright, well, let's move on to the cons. So, one of its biggest pros is also a con, is the fact that it's not complete yet. And according to the developers, it's going to take years to complete. There is currently a lot to explore, but you can definitely finish exploring it. And you have to keep yourself busy basically with dailies and the grind to level up in order to just kind of wait for the next patch, for the next update. And another con would be that there's loads of bugs. We talked about this one before in the video, where the developers are actively trying to fix bugs that they find, but there are a lot of bugs, and honestly some of them are very minor and quite funny, and they don't really affect the game, but there are a couple that are quite game breaking. A notable one is how monsters reset, making you fail challenges or making you redo them altogether. And it's honestly quite frustrating when you do encounter these bugs, and it does take away a lot from the game. A third con is it's really repetitive gameplay sometimes. It's a big grind to level up your characters, their talents, their weapons, their artifacts. All of it takes a lot of grinding, and the grinding is really repetitive. It involves doing the same dungeons, or what they call domains, over and over and over and over, and each one takes about like 3 to 5 minutes maybe. There's a honestly a balancing issue with these resources because of the way that you have to grind them and the fact that you're limited to how much you can do in a day. And the dailies are also repetitive, and they're honestly quite a time sink because if you don't want to miss out, you have to play daily. But then again, it's also a PvE game, and there's nothing wrong with missing out on a day. But it's kind of up to you what kind of gamer you are, because you can't really make up that day, basically. So this is the biggest con, in my opinion, is their difficulty. The way that they make the game more difficult is very artificial. So the way that they make the game more difficult is by doing two things. One, they just make it so that you have to finish something with a certain amount of time. You have to kill a mob with a certain amount of time. And the second thing is either they add more of a mob with it's basically the same enemies, but they just add more of them, or they make the mob or enemies be placed in a really bad place. So they just have bad enemy placements. And this is very reminiscent of Dark Souls 2, especially before Scholar of the First Sin patch. They just add more of the same mobs, and that quite frankly becomes more irritating than anything. And it's not even, it's not like they have more unique enemies for you to fight. I'm hoping that in the future, when they have more regions, it'll be less like that, and you'll actually be able to fight more mobs and more different types of enemies that make the game more difficult. Which brings me to the fact that they need better bosses. A lot of their bosses are kind of lackluster. Although they recently had a boss that was released that I found really fun, and it was really beautiful. This boss didn't really have like a timer on it where at a certain point he would just kill you like automatically, but this boss I felt like had 3 stages, and it was done really well. And there was a lot of ways you could play this boss. A lot of people did a lot of challenges with this boss, including myself, where I did a level 1 run on it. And people could have a lot of fun with this boss because of the way that they made this boss difficult. They didn't just make it difficult with like a lot of BS, like you have to finish it in a certain amount of time, or just making a boss full of mobs or enemies. But they also recently had a boss that was really quite disappointing in an event where it's just a powered up version of one of their mini bosses. So honestly, I feel like this game could work on making better bosses. Although I do have to say a lot of the mini bosses are really well done. I remember my first time playing this game when I was just like walking around and I happened to encounter a mini boss. I remember exactly how excited I felt. And another thing about their artificial difficulty is it makes playing the game more one-dimensional. You can't just build a tank team that can slowly chip away at things. You actually have to kill the thing in a certain amount of time, which means that damage becomes that much more important. And that's quite frustrating for me because I always like experimenting with new builds and experimenting with different ways that you can play a game, and you're just not really able to do that with this game. At least not in the way where you can not prioritize damage. And lastly, I think the last con would just be that their co-op mode is very bare bone. I have a more in-depth video on how they can fix this and fix their co-op mode, but essentially their current co-op mode is very lackluster and does not have much to offer. You can essentially grind a couple of things together and do your dailies together, but like that's about it. And it's not a very streamlined way of doing it either. So, is this game worth playing in 2021? Taking the cons and the pros, I feel like the pros greatly outweigh the cons. The cons can get quite frustrating, of course, but I think that with all the good things coming and with the game being completely free to play, this is a really hard game to pass up on, and I think it is at least definitely worth a try. So is it worth playing in 2021? Yes, I would definitely recommend the game. Well, that's it for my review, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. That's it. Peace.